All right, so yeah, we're going to now move into the segment on debris flow. And of course, as you know, we've got winter weather coming to San Lorenzo Valley, and the areas that are burned now may create additional damage threats to our communities. So debris flows and mudslides and flooding could be outcomes of heavy rains on our terrain. So we know that our county officials and local fire departments are working to address these and plan for those potential threats. What we're going to start with is a video from the Montecito Santa Barbara incident. So just to recap, what happened down in Santa Barbara at the tail end of 2017 was they had a fire. It's called the Thomas Fire. And the following January, they had a debris flow incident. And in this, the basic facts of that incident was that they had a 36-hour advanced warning of the storm system hitting, but it rained very hard, a ½ inch of rain in 5 minutes, and the debris flow was therefore not caused by a ground saturation situation. The evacuation rate for the fire itself, for the Thomas Fire, was reported as 75% of the folks evacuated. But what they found with the debris flow incident was, although they tried to notify the public for evacuation, they only achieved 28% evacuation. And essentially it resulted in loss of life, 23 people either killed or missing. So we wanted to start with, I'm just going to play a part of a video about the Montecito debris flow. This is a 13-minute video, but I think perhaps just the first 6 minutes of it will be educational.
The morning of the floods, I was working
in
the dispatch center. We had 9 people on. We had upstaffed just in case something did come of the storm. We started getting the first round of calls reporting the flame or flare that was being seen in the sky throughout Montecito.
The explosion happened and we saw the large 300-400 foot flames up in Montecito. And about that time, we started hearing radio traffic that the various fire engines were not able to get there because the road was blocked.
We were up at Q80 in Summerlin, the big hill in Summerlin. When the rain hit, about 3:30 in the morning when it got really heavy, I drove down the hill and it was blocked in every direction that I tried to go. The freeway, East Valley Road, Sheffield Drive, they were all blocked. My immediate concern was getting to the people that needed help.
California Highway Patrol officers had similar problems. 2 CHP officers were responding to a call of a structure fire when they unknowingly drove right into the path of the mud flow.
There is a very active mudslide coming down Olive Mill. It overtook our vehicle as we were heading north on Olive Mill. We were able to barely escape.
The rain cells just happened to focus on the main burn areas above Montecito.
Get out of here! Get out of here! Get out of here! Go! Go!
It was pretty intense. It was raining very, very hard. So hard that it was hard to see 10 feet in front of you when you're driving.
The flash flood's right there! Get out of here! Go! Oh my God, Mom!
A little after 4, it was just nonstop for about a good 90 minutes plus of 911's alternate lines just ringing without any break.
Yes, I need help. Let's get to Isabel Lane.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Your phone's cutting in and out. What is going on at that address?
Well, the house is about to be washed away. We need help.
And it was everything that you can imagine, from I'm trapped in my house but I'm safe to I'm stuck in the upstairs and it's flooded everything in my downstairs.
You need to come to our house. Our house is filled with mud. I have a newborn.
I understand that.
We're going to die.
You have a 2-story house? Can you get up out of the...
No, it's 1 story.
Okay. All right, we do have your call, okay?
We'd be up to our necks in mud if we tried to get off our bed. I don't know if we're going to live.
Okay, we're trying to get you help, though, okay? Just get as high as you can.
Okay, bye.
Okay.
There was trees 2 to 3 feet in diameter, 20, 30 feet long, piled and piled on the top of the road. So we were having a little frustrating time trying to get into the area.
Mike, get in the car. Mike, get in the car. Get in the car, Mike. Get in the car. Back up.
Some people said, I'm here, but when guys got there, said, that house isn't here anymore, and realized that, yeah, they're still in their house, but their house had either moved from where the address marker was or wasn't a recognizable address from the mud just covering any signage.
Very infrequently do we deal with the amount of mud and debris that we had to deal with in this instance. Just logistically getting from point A to point B, it's 10 times harder than walking through 10 feet of snow. It's amazing how difficult it can be. Vehicles couldn't go through 8-10 feet of mud, so ultimately the search and rescue people as well as the fire people, they just had to hike through it, including the dogs that came there. And that's very taxing.
It was really scary. We have an 8-year-old in the house. You couldn't see anything for hours because it was so dark outside. Finally, the light started coming. We started seeing some help come.
The majority of debris flow that came down from the canyons brought along rocks and trees, and as it came down and hit the upper areas of the Montecito urban area, it started collecting a lot of additional debris, cars. One time I saw a refrigerator floating by. There were a lot of cars that had flown down, and so we were checking those cars to make sure there wasn't anybody in that. And then we came to the Oaks neighborhood. One of our members noticed a light blinking up in an attic of a house. And we went to investigate, and we made voice contact with the father of a family of 5 that had been trapped. At that point, we initiated a rescue, and we spent a couple hours in that neighborhood rescuing a couple dozen people from their houses.
What I call legitimate rescues, where people are hurt and they would have been hurt further had they not been rescued, there was dozens.
The rescues included 14-year-old Lauren Canton, who'd been buried for hours in mud and debris and was pulled out by firefighters who heard her cries.
As far as just rescues of getting people out of the mud-infected area and getting them somewhere else, there was hundreds.
The Coast Guard responded almost immediately that morning as soon as the first light hit with their helicopters. In addition to the Coast Guard, we had our air support unit, which responded that morning as well with 2 Huey helicopters. We also had a Ventura County Sheriff's Office helicopter. So we had an incredible response in terms of initial rescue helicopters that made it to Santa Barbara.
It was surreal to see 6 or 7 helicopters all doing hoist rescue side by side. That's just not something that we trained for. It's not something I ever thought that I would see. It was probably as close to a Hurricane Katrina type rescue incident as we're probably going to see in this county. I think people who tried to get out of their homes and tried to get to safer ground quickly realized that as soon as they stepped in that mud, I mean, they were just engulfed in it. They couldn't get out of it. The helicopter was a very necessary tool for that morning.
Calls started coming in of bodies littering the various parts from basically the beach all the way up to Olive Mill and Hot Springs. And unfortunately, that is our job, and we had to be the ones to go and do body recovers.
There were people that were out walking around and trying to see what happened, which made doing rescues a little bit challenging. Well, obviously, we were trying to recover those that had passed, which took quite a bit of time. Most of the mud that I went through was probably close to waist deep. So it was pretty challenging, especially doing the recoveries. It was hard to get through the mud, and we tended to have to walk long distances because we couldn't necessarily get our cars through a lot of the portions, so we'd have to walk in.
Hey, Dan,
I've been doing this job a long time, and
pause the video now.
what's going through my mind was we got to keep working, so which we did.
There's obviously several more minutes of that video that you can watch, and if I can get my controls together here, I'll throw a link for that on the chat, and then you can review it again at your leisure. Oh, thank you. That's obviously a pretty emotional description of what happened there in Montecito, and so that's why this is considered such a serious risk to our area. I'm going to turn now to a slightly more educational approach, and we'll show the video, again, a portion of it, of a presentation that was given to the County Board of Supervisors. Let's see, I believe the date. Actually, there was at least 2 different presentations, and that I found. One was given at one presentation of the same material was given at the October 7 Recovery Town Hall meeting of Supervisor McPherson, his meeting, and they did a recording of that video, but it's not as clear and informative as one that was actually given earlier. So we're going to show the earlier one that it really shows all of the slides from the presentation. Dan, do you have that one ready?
Yep.
Okay, and again, here we're just going to go. This one is longer. This one's 21 minutes, and basically at that point, then it transitions into their question and answer phase, and we're going to skip that part.
CZU lightning complex fire debris flow hazards as outlined in the memorandum of the Deputy County Administrative Officer and the Director of Public Works. Hello and welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Caput and members of the board. My name is Carolyn Burke, and I'm the Senior Civil Engineer in Environmental Planning. I'm here today with Kent Edler, Assistant Director of Public Works, to speak with you about a deadly post-fire threat that many have not heard of before, debris flows. The photo that you see on the title slide was taken in the upper watershed of Molosky Creek near Boulder Creek during a multi-agency post-burn reconnaissance to evaluate San Lorenzo Valley Water District infrastructure. As you will learn during this presentation, the steep burn slopes and debris-filled channel shown in this photo illustrates a set of conditions that is primed to produce devastating debris flows during even short duration rain events. Unfortunately, this scenario is repeated on steep slopes throughout the burned area, and the resulting debris flow threat affects not only homes on hillsides or within the burn area, but also homes on flat ground a mile or more from charred slopes. Their unpredictable nature and powerful force make it imperative that we act swiftly to save lives by educating our community on the risks of debris flows and the only effective means of protection, early warning and evacuation. As noted earlier, our main objective today is to educate constituents about a likely unfamiliar geologic phenomena referred to as debris flows, and spread awareness of the absolute destruction a debris flow can leave in its wake. We will first learn a little about the physical processes that lead to debris flows and how the chances of a debris flow occurring are heightened after a fire event. Next, we'll explain the risks to life and property associated with debris flows and highlight the reasons why a debris flow cannot be ridden out or fought or escaped by those in its path. The only way to avoid this hazard is to evacuate and evacuate early. This will be brought home with the deadly debris flow scenario that unfolded in Montecito in Santa Barbara County in 2018. We will wrap up with an overview of the county's response, including risk assessment, evacuation mapping, and communication plan in the coming months. A debris flow occurs when high-intensity rainfall saturates loose soil, rock, and other debris, such as fallen trees, high up in the mountains, creating a moving mass that travels down slope. The left image is a diagram of what this looks like from a bird's eye view. This mass gets larger as it travels down the slope with the mud rock slurry picking up cars, houses, people, and anything else in its path. As the mass gets larger, it also gets faster and can reach speeds upwards of 30 miles an hour. The huge mass does not stop when it reaches the bottom of the slope, but instead flattens out, spreading and depositing debris and mud in all directions. The area covered by this debris is often referred to as the alluvial fan. Due to the speed of the mass, this area of deposition can be miles from the starting point of the debris flow. The right image on this slide is of the town of Montecito in Santa Barbara County, and shows the alluvial fan left by a debris flow that occurred after the Thomas fire in 2018. As you can see, the burned hills in the background that produced the debris flow with mud, rocks, and debris still carving channels over 1 mile away. Unfortunately, debris flows are not new to Santa Cruz County and occur during all types of rain years with devastating results, including lost lives. The two lower photos show the aftermath of debris flows that occurred during rain events in more mountainous areas of the San Lorenzo Valley and North Coast. Not only did debris engulf the homes, but they were knocked off their foundations, and you can see in the photo on the left, a tree has also pierced the rear wall of the home. The upper photos show a debris flow that occurred in Davenport in 2010, above Newtown. As you can see from the relatively gentle slopes, it is difficult to predict when and where the conditions will be just right to create a debris flow. They can occur where they never have in the past and can revisit previous sites. Fire increases both the likelihood and severity of debris flows in several ways. First, wildfires burn trees, leaf litter, and other organic matter, which leaves a waxy residue on soils and makes them effectively water repellent. This means rainfall does not percolate into the ground, and instead all the water is delivered directly downslope. This results in a larger amount of water reaching mountain drainages all at one time. What is collected in those mountain drainages is also influenced by wildfire. Burned slopes devoid of roots and organic matter, whose structure and moisture would typically hold the surface soils together, begin to erode even under dry conditions. This eroded material, along with fallen trees, collects in small drainages and swales throughout the mountains, as you can see in these photos. Then the rain hits. When it comes to debris flows, the most dangerous type of rain event is one that is short but intense. This leads to large volumes of water being delivered downslope almost instantaneously. When such a rain event hits post-fire, larger volumes of water coming off water-repellent slopes quickly saturate the larger amounts of loose soil, rock, and debris in drainages and swales, creating a semi-liquid mass that travels downslope as a debris flow. Efforts to determine the probability and locations of potential debris flows began weeks ago with dispatch of the CAL FIRE Watershed Emergency Response Team, referred to as the WERT, comprised of personnel from California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection and California Geological Survey. The WERT conducted a rapid evaluation of post-fire debris flow hazards and their potential impacts to life safety and property. Their assessment included both field reconnaissance and computer modeling to arrive at a preliminary estimate of where debris flow likelihood has been increased, as well as identification of residential and infrastructure targets at risk of being impacted by debris flows. The left image is a map developed by the WERT that shows their estimates of debris flow probability for each drainage segment in the burn area. As you can see, the highest probabilities are in the western burn areas, which correlates with higher burn severities. This should not be confused with the areas of highest life safety risk, which are defined by both the increased probability of debris flow coupled with their potential to hit existing homes. It should also be noted that the WERT mapping is preliminary and it's currently being refined by local staff, as will be explained later. One issue identified early on by both WERT and county staff was that WERT burn severity estimates were likely lower than field conditions due to the fact that their estimates were based on aerial surveys that showed green tree canopies where the understory had actually been severely burned. This means that the probabilities shown on these maps should be assumed to be higher than listed. The illustration on the right shows watershed basins in the Boulder Creek area included in the WERT report due to historic evidence of debris flow activity in the form of existing alluvial fans or areas where debris has been deposited at the base of the drainage in the past. This is only one example of a scenario that is repeated throughout the North Coast, Davenport, and other areas of the San Lorenzo Valley located within or downslope of the burn area. As noted in our last slide, people living downslope of the burn area have an increased risk when their homes are located in or near drainage channels, on or below a burn slope, and at the mouth of a drainage channel. Here we have an illustration of a high-risk debris flow scenario that is repeated throughout the burn area. The arrows are showing drainage and debris being deposited into existing drainages. The slurry flows downslope, striking homes within the drainage channel before fanning out to strike homes in the neighborhood on flat ground at the mouth of the channel. It may be difficult to picture how a home may be positioned literally in a drainage channel, but it is more common than one might think, as these are typically seasonal drainages and not raging rivers. The lower photo is of a burned home site in just this scenario. A small seasonal drainage channel runs to the left of the home site and through a culvert in the foreground, both of which are currently buried by debris. You'll note that there are larger rocks strewn throughout the photo. These are actually evidence of past debris flows that have deposited rocks from the upper watershed throughout the drainage. Due to the life safety risks described earlier in this presentation, as it sits, the burned home site cannot be reoccupied even on a temporary basis. In the background to the right, you'll see an existing home that will need to be on alert this winter and heed early evacuation notices. It is important to educate residents in our affected areas on the unique risks posed by debris flow and why, unlike fires or floods, there's no way to fight or ride out a debris flow in place. Early evacuation is the only sure way to survive a debris flow event. Debris flows are triggered by high intensity, short duration bursts of rain. By short, we mean on the order of 15 minutes. Typical forecasts predict rain totals per day or per hour, but more sophisticated modeling is required to predict systems that could produce these quick bursts. The high intensity rainfall that can trigger debris flows occurs in the upper burn area, which may not be the case at lower elevations where many debris flow targets exist. That means a resident on flat land at the mouth of a drainage may look out their window and see sprinkles, totally unaware that a burst of rain high in the mountains above is generating a debris flow that will reach them within minutes. Even if a resident somehow knew a debris flow was starting in the upper watershed, they still would not have enough time to evacuate due to the speed with which debris flows can travel, more than 30 miles per hour. Once you can see or hear a debris flow, it's too late. Finally, due to the unpredictable nature of debris flows, residents cannot predict their risk of being impacted based on their history with the property. As we have shown, the risk of debris flow already exists in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and even if your home has been safe for the past 30 or 50 years, we are now grappling with a post-fire burn scenario that we have not seen in decades longer. The threat is real, and it is worse now than ever. The only sure way to keep yourself safe from debris flows is to evacuate and evacuate early. The importance of early evacuation by residents was made clear during the devastating debris flow that hit the community of Montecito in Santa Barbara County on January 9th, 2018. The photo here is of the recovery effort in the aftermath of the event. And while it shows the physical devastation left in the wake of the debris flow, it does not begin to describe the horrific scenes encountered as the tally of lost lives mounted over the coming days. Like Santa Cruz County, Santa Barbara County was in the final days of the fight against the Thomas Fire, which ravaged 280,000 acres, including the hills above Montecito. A WERT report was also prepared for the areas downslope of the burn zone, which identified the increased debris flow risk for the community of Montecito. The county worked quickly to establish evacuation maps and coordinate with federal and state personnel to monitor weather forecasts. And for the first time in Santa Barbara County history, an evacuation warning was issued for a storm event. The evacuation warning was issued more than 24 hours ahead of the anticipated storm, giving residents ample time to get out of harm's way. Unfortunately, only an estimated 28% of residents in the evacuation area heeded the warning before the debris flow hit on January 9th, 2018 at 3:45 a.m., while most residents were sleeping in their beds. The debris flow began in the mountains above Montecito and ran all the way to the Pacific Ocean. 425 structures were destroyed, totaling $450 million in damages. Highway 1 was buried under feet of mud, slurry, and debris that rescuing personnel described as quicksand. 21 lives were lost, and 2 are still missing and presumed dead. In the face of such devastating loss, one can only ask how this could have been avoided. County staff have been in contact with Santa Barbara County officials to learn how we can educate our constituents to be prepared and escape such a disaster. I'm going to pass it on to Ken Edler.
The map shows on this slide how far debris flows can extend beyond the fire area. This is the Montecito debris flow in Santa Barbara County. On the map, the area above the red line is the burned area, and the light blue areas along the pink hatched areas are the locations of the debris flows. The dots represent affected structures, with red being destroyed and orange having major damage. The debris flows extended over 2 miles below the burn areas. The picture on the bottom left is of Highway 101, which was closed for 12 days. And the picture on the right shows typical debris that hit a house. And some of the drainages in Santa Cruz County have debris that up in the swales that looks just like this. County staff recently met with Santa Barbara officials, and they stressed the importance of the following. Debris flows can extend out many miles. Early, consistent public messaging is a must. Evacuation preparation must be done early, and people are less likely to evacuate for a potential debris flow, especially if they previously evacuated for a fire. Santa Barbara County did a survey after the debris flows and found that 75% of the people evacuated for a fire, but only 28% evacuated for a debris flow. So they strongly stress we need to get the message out that debris flows need to be taken as seriously as a wildfire. We included this slide of rainfall totals from October 13th, 2009 to stress the urgency of the issue. Santa Cruz County does sometimes get significant rainfall early in mid-October. There was a similarly sized event in October of 2004 as well. But again, we want to stress that it's not about the amount of rain in 24 hours, it's more about the intensity over a short period of time. The county is taking many steps to protect lives. The county geologist is leading a team of geologists in the field right now to map the debris flow hazards and expand on the WERT report. They are also identifying structures at risk in the hazard areas. We're also getting help mapping from the California Geologic Survey as well as the USGS. On the evacuation planning side of things, we've already been having local multi-agency coordination, which includes CAL FIRE, local fire protection districts, the Sheriff's Office, Caltrans, the City of Santa Cruz, the San Lorenzo Valley Water District, state parks, and county departments, including Public Works, Planning, Environmental Health, GIS staff, Health Services, and the Office of Emergency Services. The National Weather Service has also been brought into the conversation because determining when to evacuate is just as important as where to evacuate. Field work on the mapping effort should be done this week, and we'll be meeting with CAL FIRE and local fire districts next week about mapping and development of evacuation zones and evacuation planning. Part of the evacuation planning is also thinking about where to stage emergency response vehicles, which includes heavy equipment, fire trucks, ambulances, etc. As we get into the planning for evacuations, we'll be talking about how to make the maps available to the public. We want to get those released as soon as possible. We're already having conversations with the National Weather Service, and we'll be having frequent conversations with them throughout the rainy season regarding the events that could trigger debris flows. Public Works flood control staff are also working to fine tune our rain gauges, and we're also working with the San Lorenzo Valley Water District and the City of Santa Cruz to tie their gauges into our monitoring systems. We're also going to be having discussions about how to get the message out when the call is made that evacuations are needed. When communicating to the public, it's important that we do it in both English and in Spanish, and that the risks and evacuation plans are clear. For communication, we'll want to use social media, town hall meetings, board meetings like this, press briefings, and other avenues. We're already working with the county's PIO and will continue to do so on the most effective ways to get the message out. When we get shelter locations ready, those will need to be publicized as well, so people will know those options are available. Whenever possible, we need to issue warnings and evacuation orders as far in advance as possible. And obviously, we need to do our messaging in clear terminology. It's also important to message it's also important to message to the public what they can do. First, evacuation is the best thing to do. As Carolyn mentioned, debris flows are fast and occur without warning. We haven't seen a fire of this size in many decades, and the hillsides are going to behave in ways that people have not experienced before. Also, people reoccupying damaged homes and other people with existing homes downslope of the burn area should contact a licensed professional geologist to get an assessment of their property. People should sign up for emergency alerts, such as the app called Code Red, and pay attention to weather forecasts. Some people may be evacuated multiple times, so it's good to have a plan. Residents should be prepared with what they want to take with them and know where they're going to go ahead of time. Next is to stay alert, and heed evacuation warnings. Finally, we'll do our best to warn people, but don't wait for someone to tell you to evacuate. If you don't feel it's safe where you live, leave. This also applies to areas that are outside of the evacuation zones. So as far as the next steps, we're going to continue to communicate our mapping efforts, and we'll get those out to the public as soon as possible, hopefully within the next couple of weeks. Oops. Evacuation planning is an ongoing effort. Public messaging has started, but we're really going to ramp up that when we have the maps. We're going to ramp that up when we have the maps completed and work with the county's PIO on the most effective way to get the message to the public. And finally, we'll continue to update the board on these planning efforts. That's the end of our presentation, and we're available for any questions.
All right, let's pause it there. Thank you, Dan. All right. I think maybe what we should do is just take some comments from you all. Now I've seen a couple of pieces of content. We will have more things to speak of, but maybe now is a good time to just take a little breather and get some reactions from you all on the call. So let's see, some people are using the raise hand feature in Zoom, which is great. We'll do that, and of course, anyone will also make sure that if anyone's on a call that they get called on as well. Let's start with Gwen. Gwen, did you have your hand raised?
I think I forgot to take my hand down from the last one. Sorry.
No problem. Jen?
Yeah, I'm just curious. In the video, the second video, they talk about how debris flows move very quickly and how when one is already happening, warning people in its path is ineffective because it won't be fast enough. I'm just curious, they also recommend evacuating. So at what point during this whole process does an evacuation notice go out? Is it when they know that there's going to be a fast, intense rain, or can you shed a little more insight on that?
Well, I'm glad you've asked a tough question right off the bat, and I'm not attempting to act as a subject matter expert, and it's to a certain degree it's probably more appropriate to continue searching for more information about what gets officially sent out. I would say my overall impression, having reviewed this material, is that the method for notifying people, notifying the public, is in progress, and some the reverse 911 code red are recommended, Also, like we'll speak to weather radios a little bit later on in this meeting. That also is a potential. We're going to need to be paying very close attention to the rain systems this weekend, and also looking for our sources of information. So I don't have anything more specific, but Dan, yeah, go ahead.
My understanding in this, in the case of Montecito, they had good, sufficient, and early warning that happened to be accurate, but the problem, besides compliance with evacuations, it was also they underestimated the danger zone, the evacuation zone. So part of the event happened in the evacuation zone and part did not. So, you know, based on the reaction to the fires we had recently, I don't think the county will hesitate in having a evacuation zone that is, you know, larger than, possibly larger than past. So.
Thanks. Liz?
Two things. First of all, everyone here who has a cell phone or multiple cell phones should register with scr911.org. You can go there through Google or any of the search engines. There is a registration form there that lets you register your cell phones and VoIP phones so that they will call you and add you to those called with the evacuation warning. I worked the phones for CAL FIRE during the fire, and the number of people who told me, well, how come I didn't hear about this? And then I would ask them a couple of questions, and I would find out that they did not have a landline, so the county could not reach them that way, and they had not registered their cell phones. So there was no way to get to them using the existing 911 systems. So the most important thing in preparing, besides your go bag, is be sure you are on the list to receive the emergency notifications. First of all, that's my one comment. The second comment is, as Dan said, there were the planning for the evacuation area in Montecito didn't take into account certain factors, and this time for the valley, it will. I know that for a fact. So, not personally, but from talking with Chief Gray in Felton at Felton Fire. So those errors will not be made again. That's it.
Chris, I saw you raise your hand.
Yes, I was here in 1982 when we had the heavy storms, and that was not after a fire event like we've had, which is only going to aggravate it. And I would just emphasize to everybody not to underestimate the intensity of what we had. As Liz, you were probably here, it was 25 inches of rain in 24 hours. And there is books through the Sentinel that should be in the library. You can see the storm of 1982, along with the geology reports that were previously mentioned. I sat in tonight because I'm on an acre and a half, and it's in Scotts Valley, but it's not at risk like these places up in Boulder Creek and that. And the wax surfacing is, it's impressive on how much water can move quickly. So thank you for putting this on, and good job, everybody.
Well, one of the comments I might make in response, Christopher, I'm glad to see you here, because if this event occurs, everyone in the valley impacted by this, are going to need assistance and resources and places to park our trailers. So we will need folks not in the area to come to our aid in many ways.
Okay.
That's it, Kevin.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have additional comments from anyone?
I guess
Kyle? Yeah.
I guess I have a question about, and I know this is like trying to read the future, but but in terms of large scale evacuations, once again, it looks like when, not if. And Liz made a remark about looking for somewhere to park her trailers, but what do you know of any other relief or shelter systems that the county is working on for those who don't have trailers? I mean, not everybody can just pack up their life in their Winnebago and go visit friends in LA or whatever. So once you get that evacuation notice, then what do you do besides get out of there? I'm trying to think ahead of this to follow up, to put together tentative plans,
do you mind if
and I don't know what our
say
options are.
Sure. Go ahead, Liz.
It's pretty much going to be like the fire. The shelters will be set up, locations will be prepared, there will be private and public accommodations set up. I know that you had accommodations through Red Cross. We are all giving great thought to this. I mean, for instance, my projection would be that there will be no shelters in the valley.
I wouldn't expect there to be in the valley, because that's a prime
potential danger zone, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
but where else in the county could easily absorb the population?
We are going to be in the same situation we were in with the fire, and I don't see that the recovery or the rescue options being much different. I know that it's going to create a drain on local resources. If you've got the money, go buy a small trailer. Yeah, go ahead, Allie.
I foresee a couple of extra complications, which is a lot of the evacuated people who had nowhere else to go had to pitch tents. And
yes,
it will be raining this time. So I'm wondering if there are preparations being made to accommodate for the rain. For instance, having advanced sheltering ready to go for keeping people out of the weather, basically.
Great. Yeah, no, it's an apt concern, and we don't have the answer for that this evening, but it certainly would be a relevant concern. I see Chris and then Gary. Chris first.
Yeah, I just contemplate this whole scenario and thinking that the appropriate alerting method is indeed weather radio, and I hope you'll talk about that more. And secondly, that there are facilities in the county. I know there's been large gatherings of religious groups and so forth, and I think we should address those resources if possible. Back to you.
Gary.
Yes, the county's already looked into that. I was on a tour of the Seventh-day Adventist camp on Old San Jose Road, and they took us through, and they had their national VOAD chairman there guiding us around, and they can handle a number of people there, and they're willing to, you know, take people in, and they've got beds, they've got cottages, they've got campgrounds, and you know the county is working with them. I'm not privy to the details, but I know this is being taken place, and there's also other, you know, organizations, you know, possibly, you know, like Kennel and Camp. I don't know if they've been addressed, but I'm sure they have. But there's a number of resources that the county has been working on to have on their folder of resources for the past couple of years.
Thanks, Gary. Liz?
Yes, as a person working the call center at CAL FIRE, which was where everybody called and everybody was told, call this number for information. We immediately started getting information about shelters, a variety of things, and started networking people into shelter options, and which is sort of what you mentioned as well, Gary, because all of those locations were operationalized for the fire. So I think our recent experience makes fresh in our mind the need to have these locations available and lined up ahead. We just don't know what they are right now, and we probably won't until the last minute, because I know that Red Cross does not announce its locations for shelter until in the moment, because there's so many factors that affect what would be a worthwhile location for a Red Cross shelter. It's all impacted by what's going on around it.
Thank you. Okay. Let's pivot, and I've got a couple more things to show, and the first is, let's see if I can share my screen. Okay, share. All right, so you may already be on email receipt from Bruce McPherson's office. And if you're not, I recommend that that you do get on that email list. We certainly, you know, as you can express and we can imagine, there still seems to be quite a lot of planning that's going to be needed moving forward, right? They mentioned it in the presentation, to have a plan and to clearly communicate that plan. So there's still quite a lot involved. Now, in this is I had to sort of extract this from the email from Bruce McPherson. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, looks fine.
Thank you. So, you know, obviously the county has got multiple things going on at the same time, right? So they have cleanup from the fire, that detail. We're not going to speak to that, but I did notice that in this email, they did recap the summary of where we are here from the county. So they are investigating whether mitigation measures are possible. So they know about the necessary evacuations, and that they are working on maps that will create evacuation zones. So I'm actively looking for that material, haven't found it yet. We have seen, some of us might have already seen some information from the U.S. Geological Survey with a map depicting landslide risks. By the way, this first link, this is the likelihood of debris flows, leads to a web page for the County of Santa Cruz, debris flows, mud flows. And I'll put the link for this in the chat. And so this is a recap, and here's this sort of satellite view of that initial map showing the different areas of probability of debris flow. And then below it, I noticed that there are a number of links including the very last one, which was the video that we watched. So this page will probably be continue to be a source of good information. And again, I'll put that link in our chat momentarily. I also noticed that there was another message that came from McPherson's office. And this is interesting. It says residents who live near the fire impacted areas but whose properties were not damaged or destroyed are urged to register with FEMA in case they are eventually affected by debris flows. So that is interesting. And I was contemplating this, and I have not validated this with anyone, but my assumption is that the process to register with FEMA may require documents that you have, at home, and perhaps that process to register would be best done in advance of actually having a debris flow incident make life difficult on you. So I thought this was a very interesting comment. All right, so that's what I wanted to share. How do I stop sharing? And Karen, I noticed you made you had a comment. Would you like to make that comment to everyone?
Sure. My understanding is that the county is using the Zone Haven tool that they used for the fire evacuation zones for the debris flow evacuation zones. So I'm guessing that we'll see a website interface at some point for those.
Great, thank you. This actually might be a great time to Liz to come back to you and pick up what you've been involved with in conversations locally in the Valley about what we expect moving forward.
Okay, I can only talk very generally, but I want folks to know that in the presentation that was given to the Board of Supervisors, there were references to groups that were meeting concurrently and still are meeting about addressing or getting ready for the problems that could be anticipated with debris flow. And I personally was approached by Ray Cancino, who is the head of Community Bridges, which is an umbrella organization for local family resource centers, of which Mountain Community Resources is one, and that's where I have my office for SERT and SLVEN and where we are housed. He asked me to help bring together folks who, like Chief Gray and somebody from the county, and start to talk about what would be needed in the event of debris flows and how that might impact the area. And so he's already, and that's just one private, or it's a nonprofit, but they're already loading up on stuff that they think they're going to need. I can say that because it's in my office. I also want to extend this discussion a little bit, or extend your view of this discussion, in that when debris and of the magnitude that was mentioned in the piece on Montecito starts to flow down, in their case, it wound up going to the sea. Just washed right on over to the Pacific. In our area, what it's highly likely that it will in fact wind up in the river. And Dan and I live in the floodway. So down along the San Lorenzo in Felton Grove. And there are other areas along the river that will be negatively impacted, which would not be immediately obvious to folks. So that's another potentiality. So those of us who live in the floodway, whether it's in Ben Lomond, Felton, Paradise Park, everywhere along the San Lorenzo, there's a potential for things to be backed up, to be barricaded, flash flooding, and things along those lines. Because you saw the magnitude of the trees and boulders that came down. In 1998, there was a situation somewhat like that occurred in the San Lorenzo, and when it broke loose, it became a flash flood. So those things have happened in this area. But and that's of concern to the fire departments and the the county as well. But I do want everybody to know there's like a slow march to address this matter. And while not everybody can everything can hit the papers or Facebook or whatever, there are a number of people who are looking at what kind of resources are we going to need when and if this occurs. The other thing that people need to know is that sandbagging, depending on where you live, sandbagging is going to be a waste of time and a waste of energy and a waste of resources. There may be places where that will be helpful, but that's not going to be a significant help. Again, they likened it to an avalanche, and one of the YouTube videos that Dan and I watched is called "The Night It Rained Boulders," and this was also a more extended piece on the Montecito debris flow. So having watched that, and like I said, I have had conversations. I know that the county, that the Valley fire departments are having conversations. And also, I want to step back a second and just let y'all know that not only do we have the fire in August, we're having the PSPS right now, the public safety power shutoffs, which is creating tension in our community. It's not something that's happening so much down in Santa Cruz. And so we've got that, plus we're thinking about debris flow and how we're going to protect people. So just know that your public service, especially public safety people, have sort of been hit with a triple punch right now. And but they're doing a great job of keeping up with it. So I can't necessarily give you all the details. Some of them are what ifs, and we certainly don't want to create panic. But at the same time, the simple message that you should get your go bag and your dog's go bag and your horse's go bag and get all of that stuff lined up and be ready to walk out at a moment's notice. That's the best advice to everyone. And look at your property. You know, if there's stuff that's precious to you and you are in one of those downflow areas, you may want to think about moving it out to public storage or someplace like that if you think that your house might be at risk. If you're really concerned about it, be aware there are professionals that can assist with this and give you advice, you know, engineers, civil engineers, there are structural people. So if you have concerns about this and you want to pursue that, you can do that. we're kind of in the same place we were with the fire, and that is what we can do collectively is limited. And so we have to depend on the members of the public to be concerned enough with their own safety that they follow the good advice and get themselves ready. Part of the reason our fire situation was so successful, that's a hard, I know successful isn't not a good word there, but is because people were able to be evacuated and everything was done in an orderly fashion, and so I trust at this point for our professional folks to have a plan in place but we need to do our part and leave. Tammy, I don't know if that was fully what you want, but
Thank you. On the chat, I just wanted to comment. Mark was asking me if I had a link to what I was just sharing from McPherson's office, and I put a link, but it's not a good link. I was looking for a link that would allow other people to subscribe to his newsletter. I have not found that, and I have not found the same content from those email newsletters on a website from the supervisor's office at this time. So my apologies for that.
can we call the office and ask to be put on the list?
Well, I presume that is possible. Let's see, Bruce McPherson, let's see, just copy email. I'm going to copy Bruce McPherson's email address and put that in the chat, and try sending that email address, bruce.mcpherson@santacruzcounty.us. Try sending him an email. I apologize. It looks like that's the best that I can really do at this moment. I do find personally that these emails that are coming from his office. Oh, Jen is putting supervisorbrucemcpherson.org. His website has a link. Thank you so much.
I'd also like to raise the fact that it's not just Supervisor McPherson. Supervisor McPherson and Supervisor Coonerty have joined ranks to work on this because both of their supervisor districts were impacted by the fires. So they are working together to take care of the people in their districts. So I want to commend both of them for the work they're doing.
Thank you. I saw a couple hands, Gwen and Allison.
I just had a comment. I know, Liz, you're concerned about the San Lorenzo Valley, but I think there's going to be slides that are over on the Davenport side also. From those maps, it looks like that may even be a worse area than San Lorenzo. Does that make sense?
Yeah, actually, thanks for mentioning that. I'm going to shortly here show you a document that came out. It came out earlier this month, but I saw a notice of it on Saturday, and it's the report from the WERT, which is the team that did the actual study. So I'm looking for WERT means Watershed Emergency Management Team, and it goes into actually great detail and is certainly more than just San Lorenzo Valley. So hold that thought. Allison, did you have something? And then Chris.
It was just a couple comments on Liz. One was already just made about Bonnie Doon, but I think that most of us in the meeting are on this side and thinking that we're not going to have as much of a problem as Bonnie Doon. And the message is that we may end up having as much of a problem as Bonnie Doon, especially around Alba Road. So everybody should really be on alert in one way or another. Also, she mentioned public storage, which I had not thought about before, but it might be good to put that on whatever notifications that if we make any kind of notifications, that's an option that people who are in the danger zone look to renting a small storage space and storing their most valuable things there for the whole rainy season, so that they don't even have to think about packing it when they are given the warning. That's just the two comments I have to make.
Thanks. Chris?
Yeah, I looking at the Montecito video makes me feel that maybe our biggest challenge is public education, and that the public that needs it, that's most at risk, may be some of the least persuasive in that effort. And I'm feeling a little bit of apprehension about whether or not we can be successful. Back to you.
Yeah, surely. What I want to do is there's 3 main things I want to cover in the rest of tonight's evening. And so we've got a half hour, which is, so what I'd like to do actually is segue from Chris's comment. Dan, do you want to talk about radios, weather radios? And then what I'd like to do is actually show you guys some portions from the WERT report and give you a link for future reading. But it would be, I think you'll be very interested in the depth of detail that's in that report. And then finally, we can come back and have a little bit of communal conversation around how we might prepare for evacuations for debris flow, taking what we've learned from the last time and trying to predict forward what we should do this time. Okay, so Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, so see if it does advance. All right. So anyway, one of the options that had been briefly mentioned in that report was the idea of using weather radios as an alerting system. The alerting systems through the cell phones will work, but my experience is a lot of times that, I mean, personally, I've missed alerts simply because maybe the volume's been turned down, or it was in the wrong part of the house at night, or of course the battery could be dead, and who knows, maybe even it was an issue of you don't have particularly have a cell phone that works that well at your house or possibly where you are. So there's another option, and it's an infrastructure that has already existed for some time, and that's our weather radio system. It of course for years and years has been simply producing the audio recordings of used to be somebody reading the weather, and I don't know if you can hear this. I don't know if you can hear that in the background, but you know,
yeah.
runs 24/7, and like the slide shows, it covers 90% of the population in the 50 states. But it's been fairly recently upgraded to be more of an all hazard service. You may have seen when watching TV, and you might have seen a noise and then a crawl at the bottom of your screen, and it might be announcing an Amber Alert. Not weather related, but it's something of public interest. And we've also had that happen where we were alerted of a potential flooding here in the San Lorenzo River. So there's transmitters all over the United States. Our local one is on Mount Umunum, which is, for has a great coverage of the Santa Cruz County. This particular site covers both the Monterey Bay area and the San Francisco. And the technology that's going to make this work for us is called specific area message encoding, or SAME. And it allows every county to have a unique number. Ours in this, as this map shows, is 6087. And this bottom blob of green shows the coverage of this, of our local transmitter. And as you can see, it's pretty complete in the county. There we go. So the same technology will produce the weather radio transmitter will transmit a code to these more advanced radios that are set to only pay attention to codes for a particular county. And these codes have been extended from beyond just weather to things like, well, like I mentioned, child abduction. But in our case, it could be evacuation. And when these codes are transmitted, not only does the screen of some radios display the actual emergency, but then the radio, which has been silent previously, now starts broadcasting the audio of the particular emergency. So this is, I think, a more, well, would be a more broad coverage of people. I mean, if you have, like you see the radio pictured in, next to the keyboard, if that was sitting by your bed at night, we spend almost a third of our lives asleep, and if that's by your bed at night and that thing goes off, you're going to wake up. That's not going to be necessarily the case for your cell phone beeping at you. So, and believe me, we've heard it go off even if it's in the living room, and it's it's like the smoke alarm going off. So most of these radios are in the $20 to $30 radio range. The one on the desk there that has a nice display on it, it's only $30 on Amazon. Particular endorsement implied, but the one in the red one, includes a regular AM FM radio, and I think it looks like it has a crank for charging and a light, and will charge your phone and make your coffee in the morning. No, not really. And then it also shows a little portable one, which I think is like $20. Now, those of us that are ham radio people or just interested in listening, if you have a 2-meter radio or dual band 2-meter 440, you can easily program your radio and pick up this local frequency of 162.550. I've told people too that it's a good thing to have programmed into your radio, because if you can't get this station, there's something wrong with your radio. Like I said, it's on a Mount Upanum, which is line of sight for most of Santa Cruz County, and it's 1,000-watt transmitter. So the plan is, so the plan is to coordinate with the National Weather Service, who is the owns and operates these transmitters, in a evacuation scenario, is to use these amongst all the other notification methods to alert people of a need to evacuate. Yeah, and so Jen is saying she has one that's similar to the red one that's immensely helpful as a hand crank or plug-in charge, flashlight, USB ports, no AM FM. And a lot of other radios that you wouldn't think has this, like some FRS radios will have a weather channel. Question from Robert?
Yes. So I'm still thinking about Chris Angelo's comment that you know, kind of pessimistically, that the people who most need to be notified, and also I mean the earlier, you know, the Montecito video where they talked about, or possibly it was the other video, but that it may be sprinkling where you are, and you have no idea that just in minutes you're going to get this debris flow right where you are. Now for the fire, you know, I got 3 messages all at once: text message, you know, email, and phone. I would be happier to have the NOAA receiver device you've described also, but I know I can just imagine there's lots of people who won't have any of that.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, is there a way we could kind of get an inventory of everybody who does get these notifications, and set up a grid where they can go door to door and just in their very few neighbors around them, or somehow get people's phone numbers, so that in local areas, somebody who is a hub who can be relied upon to get the message can somehow notify their nearest neighbors and get this word out. That's all I can think of.
Well, and it's, you know, it's not out of the realm of possibility that could be a task for SERT if they had, thinking out loud here, that if they could identify certain homes and properties, could be a task possibly as a first SERT call out, where probably wouldn't involve the Felton SERT directly unless we were going to assist up in Bedlam and Boulder Creek, Bonnie Doon area. But yeah, no, I think that's an idea, and I don't know that they're going to pursue every possible method of communication, but if you're a hermit or don't believe in mud flows, then you're eventually going to be a victim.
I see Mikhail and Chris.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that sounds very much like a map your neighborhood activity. And is there anybody here who could speak to how you might integrate, you know, the door-to-door knocking warning system with a map your neighborhood? Or is that too much for this meeting?
We could cover map your neighborhood in another meeting, but the concept is not far from what Robert's speaking to, which is to make connections with your neighbors. Map Your Neighborhood is a program that just helps to try to structure that and formalize it to give neighbors something that's very specific and tangible to speak to. But the upshot of that is to be able to respond with it locally within your neighborhood and look after each other. So that's a really good idea. Thanks for that. Christopher.
I remember the air raid sirens we used to have to respond to, and I've seen in some areas. I thought that in San Lorenzo Felton area there used to be a siren in use, and wondering if that should be resurrected. If not,
it's retired.
Yeah.
Oh, we're directly responsible for getting that put into place, and there was always an issue with funding it, and there was always an issue with who owns it, and so it was decided to go with just the more modern, you know, reverse 911, etc. So in this case, well, you know, the siren was only meant to service 50 homes, so.
Yeah, I remember in 1982 coming across the old bridge in Felton, and it was shuddering. It was vibrating from the water going through. I can only imagine if it was a mud flow also, that it would be many times worse. and that a number of these canyons that like go up to Zayani and Lompico and that they all come out in that floodplain. And
Yeah, I don't necessarily have the science behind me, but I'm concerned of the river getting, San Lorenzo getting backed up and then suddenly kicking loose, and the surge, which would normally be a normal amount of flow, now because of the surge floods our neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And I see Chris, and then we're going to proceed. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, you know, these alerts often go over commercial radio as well. I can remember crossing San Lorenzo River on down on on Mission Street, Highway 1, and hearing an alert over the radio about coming rain and so forth. It's just a matter of people being aware and doing what's necessary. Like I said, I think that's the biggest problem, is the education of public who are at risk, and getting them to follow through.
Thanks, Chris. I'm going to show you now a document, which is the WERT report. This is the Watershed Emergency Response Team Evaluation, WERT evaluation, CZU Lightning Complex. And again, this is a substantial document, 207 pages. So let me just show you what I see in it. Substantial contents, talking about physical settings, the way that they set up remote sensing and did the modeling, some observations and recommendations they have specifically, and then there's lots of appendices with data. Let me just show you this opening page with the mission statement that describes the WERT team and what they did. And I've highlighted, this is my highlighting here on this page that you've seen. So it is intended that the agencies identified above will use the information presented in this report as a preliminary guide to complete their own more detailed evaluations and to develop detailed emergency response plans and mitigations. So just be clear, this is the initial evaluation where we should expect further development of plans. I noted that they have a term that they call values at risk, so that they can try to evaluate what is the risk to human life, safety, and property. You'll see that term in this document. Summary of the key WERT findings. They looked at soil burn severity, where moderate and high soil burn severity typically create the most impacts. They estimated the percent of the area burned at moderate to high soil burn severity versus low to very low soil burn severity. They're saying the overall likelihood and magnitude of hazards are relatively high for some areas downslope and downstream of the fire. So they have 111 VARs identified about these downslope areas, 19 VARs identified to have high life safety threats. So, and they say most of the high life safety threats were associated with potential debris flow hazards. Many include multiple structures on alluvial fan deposits in the Boulder Creek area and along State Routes 9 and 236. There is significant risk to water supply infrastructure for the San Lorenzo Valley Water District. And then the document does go into sort of an analysis of these different storm scenarios in terms of how many inches of rain in a certain period of time. So I'm going to, with my apologies, I'm just going to scroll forward and highlight a couple of pages. additional pages. Okay, so this, with respect to their general recommendations, they come out right up front and tell us, utilize early warning systems. Code red is Santa Cruz County. SMC alert is San Mateo County. Clearly communicate the high potential and high risk consequences of the post-fire watershed hazards to the agencies responsible for emergency planning and response. Increase the situational awareness of affected residents and the communities regarding the hazards and risks associated with living downstream and downslope of the burned areas, to which we are meeting tonight and trying to raise awareness. Perform monitoring and maintenance. Place temporary signage. Utilize temporary flood control and structure protection. Monitor and remove accumulated debris. So then we go into the report itself. This report is substantial. There are lots of maps. I'm not going to pretend to interpret them for you, but let me point out a few things here. I highlighted in green. The WERT's goal is not to reduce hill slope runoff and erosion. Rather, the goal is to minimize risk to life, safety, and property values downslope or downstream of the fire area. Prescribing treatments to reduce the hill slope runoff and erosion is beyond the scope of the WERT. This was important to emphasize so you understand what the scope of this document is. They talk a lot about the physical setting of the topology with predictions on rainfall. This map is an analysis of slopes. There's just map after map after map. They know a lot about the fire history in this area. Again, here this section is referring to tributaries that are downslope of burned areas along the Highway 9 corridor and along Highway 1 that demonstrate alluvial fan morphology. So that's a big subject in this document. Again, this is referring to the construction of the slopes and the how they're formed. And in essence, what they're saying here, for these reasons, the majority of highest risk post-fire debris flow hazards to life safety were identified within the communities of Boulder Creek and Ben Lomond. They have some interesting history of landslides and rainfall history. I'm going to skip forward on this. Here, though, I will point out that this their conclusion based on the modeling, it's reasonable to assume potentially adverse effects to shallow slope stability will be exacerbated for the next several winter seasons. So this, they're saying right off the bat, not likely to be just this first winter that we are encountering these problems. Okay, so skipping forward, lots of beautiful maps. Historical information from Big Sur was considered, looks like. And there are some things that they do call out. For example, Boulder Creek Elementary School situated on an alluvial fan in the San Lorenzo River Valley. So let me just jump forward to, so this is, I'm on page 19 of this report, and it goes on and on. Here, these are maps which have to do with the amount of rainfall within a period of time. So this one is a particular rate, 15 minutes of a 20 millimeter rainfall. The next one is slightly more rainfall, 32 millimeters per hour rainfall, and then the heavier rainfall, 40 millimeters per hour. So you can see that they've done analysis of how much rain could be falling over this area and looking at the effects of that. Okay, so I'm going to jump to Just to give you an example, can I do this? Can I go to page 40? Okay. There are areas of this report that do get very specific of some areas. In this case, this is each of these places that they've analyzed, they call a VAR, and they've given it a number. And so this is an example of where they can look at structures that exist and make some assessment of whether a deflection structure might be feasible and under what condition. So this one's obviously, this is Big Creek on Swanton Road. And then on the next page, I got that right, 41. Okay, 40 and 41. Here is a diagram actually showing Boulder Creek Elementary School with, in the middle of this image, indications of alluvial fan, and then some analysis of potential deflection structures that could be considered to address a scenario like this. And then one more. This is Ben Lomond, no, sorry, Brookdale. Clear Creek coming in on the left side towards Brookdale, and demonstrating historical alluvial fans and what they're showing as choke points. So I'll only call these out just to give you a sense of the degree of detail that has gone into this report and some of the specificity that is in it. And it's well too much for me to try to summarize any further for you, but thank you. I recommend that if you're interested, use the link, download the document, and take a look at it. And I will stop sharing at this moment and take some comments.
Gail has her hand up.
Gail.
Yes. Hi, Tammy. I don't have a way to put my hand up otherwise. I have that WERT report. If you go to the first map in Appendix C, that actually is sort of the summary of the whole thing. And what it shows is the probabilities of, or the hazards as a function of the sort of lowest threshold storm that we would get, maybe 2 to 3 per year. And it also shows what the USGS calls watch streams. And these are streams that they expect to have elevated flow, probably debris-laden streams, if there are debris flows in the basins above. And then it also includes the FEMA floodplains. And so I don't know if you want to share that again and try to find it, but it's, and it also shows the VARs on that map. And while you're finding it, I can just, that's a good one for everybody to sort of understand. This is a pretty technical report. So I actually a couple of days ago posted on Nextdoor a kind of translation of what it means for the hazards in various parts of the area around the fire. And the big ones, as we commented before, were that the area on the west side, because the burning was so severe there, is the place where you have the biggest chance of debris flows. There's almost 100% chance that you're going to have debris flows there. But there's not as many life safety risks. I think one back, 70, page 70. Yeah, here we go. So this is a sort of a summary of this. And like I said, if you're in the red, you're in the high probability zone, and that means you've got something like 60 to 80% chance of a debris flow happening in one of these storms, which typically we have 2 to 3 of per year. And the yellows are what are called low probabilities, but they're still finite. They're something like 0 to 20%. And then you can see those sort of purple streams. So for example, if you look if you look at Brookdale's, you can see 3 yellow dots, a red dot, and then a yellow dot. Yeah, that's Clear Creek drainage coming down there, and it's a
Right in the middle
moderate
of the
hazard
screen.
drainage. And the town of Brookdale is built on an old alluvial fan that was constructed out of old debris flows coming out of Clear Creek. And so all of the houses of Brookdale are at risk because if the creek jumps, is full of debris and jumps the area on Highway 9, we really don't know which way it'll go down. And so you can see that if the debris flow goes down there, then there's all these other streams that are coming down. Then it, of course, goes into the San Lorenzo River. And if you now move south on that map, you can see some of the areas near Ben Lomond. There's sort of a blue hatching if you zoom in. Those are the low areas near Ben Lomond and Highland Park. And then the yellow dot for Felton, where they have that large area that is potentially flooded if we get debris flows bulking up the San Lorenzo River. You can also see the potential of Bull Creek coming in and flooding into Felton, and Shingle Mill Creek, and finally Gold Gulch Creek also adding flows. Now the hazards in Felton, you can see that the basins above are yellowish, and so those are low hazards. And so the probability and also the volumes calculated from the USGS model are small. So the debris flows are likely to be small, but the thing is all of these areas, all of these watch streams, there's going to be elevated runoff because of the lack of vegetation and because of the hydrophobic nature of that waxy burned area. And so even if there isn't a debris flow in the basins above, all of these are going to have extra runoff. And so a lot of downtown Felton is at risk. And somebody mentioned that they lived in Felton Grove and they're worried about it, and they should be. And Paradise Park, and of course all the way down to the ocean. So
I see that there's two people have raised their hands, but I've got my screen sharing, so I can't manage that well. Dan, can you address that? Can you call?
Yeah, I
people?
saw Chris first, Kyle, and then Robert.
Thank you.
Well, I guess it's my turn. You know, I was thinking that the debris flow hazard has existed in the Santa Cruz Mountains without burn areas, and there has been debris flows with loss of life without having a burn area involved. Also, I think that people at risk, if they think that, well, I'll evacuate when something happens, it's way too late. You might not even have a road to evacuate with in that case. That's my comment.
Yeah, I think that's I was talking to Jeff Nolan, who's the county geologist, and we're very concerned with the whole idea of evacuation and what that means. It's both our opinion that as soon as you get any rain, virtually every culvert along Highway 9 in the San Lorenzo Valley is going to clog up with debris and ash. And you're going to have small debris flows coming, you know, not big ones, but just small ones in many places on Highway 9. And so the idea of, you know, this is not going to be an evacuation like the fire evacuation, because it's going to be taking place usually in the winter. It might even be raining. And so we don't really know what the county is planning. I hope that in some cases maybe they're planning just to get people to high ground rather than thinking that everybody's going to leave the whole basin the way we did with the fire. I mean, one of the aspects of this is that you're usually only really trying to evacuate for a few hours. It's not like the fire, because the high intensity rainfall events don't last very long. So it's a different form of evacuation.
Thanks for that. Someone else had a hand?
Well, yes. So I guess that may be me. So I'm kind of thinking along the same lines as everyone else, and my thinking is that we really will be. I mean, I'm talking about anyone who's in the flood prone area or the debris flow area would probably need to. They can't wait until it starts raining, so it's going to be weather based. So any alerts that go out would have to be hours or even a day or two early to get everyone prepared and ready to go hours before the actual precipitation hits.
Oh, I think you're talking about 24 hours or more.
Yes,
so when I say it's raining, what I'm meaning is just that you don't evacuate every time it rains. You evacuate every time that it's predicted that there'll be one of these high intensity events.
Exactly.
But it might be raining while you're telling people, right?
Yeah,
to move.
I guess it could be raining at a low intensity.
Right.
But it would need to be several hours, like you say. 24 hours would be much better. So you have a chance to get people out before the roads are all blocked. So I'm a docent at Henry Cowell, so I believe that the people at Henry Cowell, if they haven't already been notified, I will forward this on to some of the people I know. But it also seems odd to me that I know there is a big kink in the San Lorenzo River inside of Henry Cowell, which maybe they're thinking that would block the debris flow from getting down to Santa Cruz. But I'm wondering, it doesn't look like they're concerned about downstream.
The reason is that, if you keep going down all the way to Santa Cruz, you can see there are areas near Santa Cruz and there's some other little places. In many cases, the San Lorenzo River is quite deeply incised. And so, and there's no houses right on it, right? And so you can get a debris flow down there, but it's not really it'll just block up the channel, but it's not there's no floodplain down there. It's deeply incised and it's just gonna fill up.
Well, so
that's also true in other places on the San Lorenzo River, and even on Boulder Creek on 236.
Yeah.
So if you go up to Boulder Creek, you can see that Boulder Creek has a number of short drainages that have moderate to high chances of producing rainfall. So coming out of, and there are alluvial fans up there, Jameson Creek, Peavine Creek, Foreman Creek, and then down at Clear Creek, all of those, because there are alluvial fans and it's a little bit flatter, that's where people build their houses.
Yes.
And all of those are capable. And of course, Boulder Creek itself, you can see it's got all that orange hatch there because Boulder Creek was built on the confluence of Boulder Creek and the San Lorenzo River. So it's subject to winter flooding anyway in the northeastern portion. So much of the town of Boulder Creek so that slide that Tammy showed us was actually a very tiny little creek called Harmon Creek that comes down. And fortunately, it's such a tiny little basin, it can't really produce a big mud flow or a big debris flow.
So I didn't want to belabor this, and I do understand the difference between you're on a floodplain versus, a deeply, the downstream, as San Lorenzo River goes into the city, of course, it's very deep and large dug out. But just to be devil's advocate here, that portion, as San Lorenzo River gets down into Santa Cruz, you're draining an enormous area. It's taking water from throughout Henry Cowell at that point, or half of Henry Cowell is draining into there, in addition to Ziante and Bean Creek and all of these other flows coming in. And then supposing there were a dam, supposing the debris created a dam down actually in Santa Cruz. I mean, I don't know. I'm not, you know, a hydrology expert or anyone, but I don't know if anyone has thought about if there was a big enough dam to block water temporarily and then it could flood out. I don't know.
Well, I think what we saw, for example, in 1982 with the Love Slide up in Love Creek, and that created a temporary lake. Yeah. And then when it burst through, it created a very large debris flow that went all the way down the San Lorenzo River and created debris flows that took out a lot of the low-lying area in Santa Cruz, including, you know, a whole bunch of trailer parks and things. So
that's
yes,
what I'm thinking. Yeah.
that was because there was a landslide, but there could be something similar.
Yeah.
Or there could just be gigantic log jams.
Yeah, right, right. Yeah. Okay, so that was my only concern, yeah.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much, Gail, for your advice. Impromptu as it was, I very much appreciate that. All right, we have actually now well gone past our 9 o'clock hour for the end of this meeting. So I think that's what we should do is wrap it up with gratitude for all of you to have come this evening. I think we can probably stop the recording.